quite emotive for a lot of people. I deal with people who say, if it's not open source, you're doing the wrong thing. And there are people who take the Microsoft Kool-Aid, and if it's not a Microsoft solution, you can't do it. So there are Kool-Aid fans on both ends. I sit somewhere in the middle, which is about what's appropriate and what's best and a mixture. I believe, my personal belief is that it becomes a crutch for people to say, I'm only going to go one way or the other, and it takes away using innovation, it takes away ICT being seen as a driver and enablement of this versus a straight cost. So that's, but I want to talk about open source software, commercial software. This is a slide that came out of Forrester at the start of the year. And what they talk about here is where, this is the respondents, where CIOs or equivalents actually spend their money. And it's actually quite an interesting graph from my consideration. So this is a custom software. And this is the packaged applications. And then the platform infrastructure where they're spending. The interesting thing is there's a consistent trend between both the packaged applications and the custom software. And right down the end, so we have some people who spend everything either in packaged or everything in custom software and platform and infrastructure. So it's an interesting spend where people tend to spend their money. The question is, and we were talking about this before at breakfast, is, for a lot of companies, is this spend actually seen as value? Is it cost? Is it a driver? But we go one step further, and people start talking about open source, and what the hell is open source? This is just a tag I pulled off the internet, and you can see there's a whole range of different words that might be related to open source. There's even Microsoft somewhere. There's Microsoft, Java, Web 2.0, Drupal. You can go crowdsourcing. There's all sorts of things that mean open source to people. So it's quite a challenging environment. Directory DNS is effectively an open source solution. What drives the internet, the domain name servers, is pretty much an open source environment. So we'll use it one way or the other, day in, day out. All I want to say is there's a lot that is actually open source, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So when you're talking about it, you've got to say, what does it actually mean? But here's an interesting one I also got up from CNET, and it's just a screenshot. But as I said, traditional vendors have struggled. But we're finding that more and more people are actually going and using things like Linux, and adoption is actually increasing. And in fact, Red Hat's biggest competitor in the Linux space is the non-paid Linux. And what they're saying here is companies are becoming more and more comfortable actually using Linux in an unsupported mode. I don't need someone else to come and do it, I can actually look after it myself. And I like the last sentence, but that doesn't change the fact that open source software is taking the lead in a number of categories. The big guys like Google and IBM are using it as a wedge to dislodge commercial software competitors. So it's here to stay. I'm running on a Mac that has a whole lot of open source stuff. If you're using an iPhone or a whole lot of others, it's using WebKit, which is an open source from Apple web environment. So you've got companies that open source everything, companies that open source components, and chances are, as I said, you're using it day in, day out. There's a problem though when people start talking about open source, and there's a range of models about how you use open source. We often end up with a struggle where there's a one-size-fits-all. And you'll have a solution that is, here it is, go and use it. The trouble about one-size-fits-all solutions is you end up sometimes with a sort of a mismatch between what you want and what you get. So there's a challenge about how you deliver open source and how you support it. Now, what I will say is I know that in Auckland there's an incredibly diverse and supportive community of open source solutions. There are people in Auckland I know who are contributing to a lot of the big open source solutions around the world. You then have companies like Silverstripe in Wellington doing some amazing stuff around content management system. You've got Eagles guys working all sorts of stuff around PBXs, I mentioned. So it's some very cool solutions, recognised worldwide. And in fact, open source is actually is a really great field for New Zealanders to play, because it's a relatively low cost to get into, you get innovative and you're part of the community. We've got all these problems. I've got this problem at the ARC, and I want to talk about it. And the problem is my telecom bill. Who here receives the telecom bills for their company? Who gets the big wad of paper, you almost wheel in the bills each month? Who actually understands it? Oh, someone don't understand. You must work for a telco.
No, I work for a company that processes those things.
Ah, right. Okay, so this is probably for most of us the problem around telco billing. Now, our bill was coming in, and it's quite big. It really was a wad of paper. And all that would happen to get that into our SAP environment, which is where all our financials is done, is we take the bottom line of the dollar and sort of put it in, and there'd be a bit of manual journaling and stuff. But really we had no detail or accuracy of the incredibly complex bill that came from telecom. No way to analyse. We literally cover parts in the four corners. So what did I want to do? I wanted to be able to say to the organisation in a much more structured way to be able to understand how we deal with our telecom billing. Because, it's quite complex. And I wanted to be able to map out where it all went. And exactly what was coming in, and I wanted to be able to break it out. We centrally fund all the telecommunication costs out of my budget. We actually got that process of collapsing. It used to be spread out all over the place. Typical thing for people. I would make savings on the telecom bill in general because of our rates with GNI. The business would then get it, but no one would actually have to hand back the money. So we've gone to a centralisation. But I still needed to show, for instance, how much money was being spent, for instance, up at Window Home, which is the northern sector, on the entire business. At least be able to get a breakdown of the business where the money was being spent. And because, we're talking about voice, mobile data, and data. So we've got, all volumes of the business. The key thing was I wanted to understand if I didn't want to spend a huge amount of money. And I wanted something that was going to be fast and agile. Now, the typical solution would be, in say the SAP environment, you'd actually try to get someone to write some SAP stuff. Or someone said to me, why don't you get BizTalk? Now, how much does it cost to put a BizTalk server?
38,000.
Sorry?
38,000.
38,000. That's the starting line. And that's before you've done really any analysis or anything else, right? So just $38,000 just to get some skin in the game. And the one that I came across, I just happened to be glancing, was this product here. They won the Best Data Integration Platform Award. And it's a product called Talond. Now they also won one of what they call their Bossing Best of Open Source Awards. So it was an open source solution. So here's an integration platform, and it beat out all the commercial offerings as far as I've got to do data integration. Oh, that's going to be good. Went on and had a bit more of a look, and got to their site. So if you want to go and have a look, it's great. Now there's a couple of great things about this offering. They work in one of the modes that actually makes open source C quite reasonable and supported. In that you can get the free version and just use it, or there's a slightly higher version that has a bit more support and more server orientated, or the full-on support. So you can actually try it before you buy it. Quite like that. Also, an incredibly active community. And that's one of the things when you are looking at open source, is actually go onto the forums and see, are people there, or was the last posting from 2 years ago, in which case it's probably no longer an appropriate solution to be looking at. But also, one of the key things for me is I work with SAP. Who's got SAP here? So, when you're connecting our systems up to your SAP environment, what happens if you use a non-certified connector to your SAP?
You just don't.
You don't, because why?
Because we just don't integrate.
Well, if they do, they might integrate, but if it's not certified by SAP, if something goes wrong in your SAP environment, SAP goes, you voided your warranty support, you have to pay for any work that we might do. If you use a SAP certified connector, which Talond had, and something goes wrong with an SAP where data goes through the certified connector, SAP is covered by your support contract. And you might guess SAP is not cheap when you get support, you have to pay for it. This is sort of the Eclipse framework type stuff, so anyone who knows Eclipse. But it's actually got an environment where a business analyst can actually work. So I want an environment that I didn't always have to have highly technical people doing integration with. Because typically with SAP you use a thing called XI or PI, and again it costs you an arm and leg because SAP people are not cheap. But this tool basically allowed me to hook in via a connector into SAP and do all the smarts separately outside and have business analysts and a bit of programmatic support to actually do all the rules, the manipulation of data and load it into SAP. Pretty cool. Across a company, in this case called ClearPoint here in Auckland, who do integration with. And they work in things like, they work in BizTalk with TVNZ, they work with Mule, they work in a whole range of things. They use the appropriate tools in different companies. And they came and said, oh, they did integration information, but we haven't done Talond work before. But I said, look, I know you haven't done Talond, but I need you to do it because of SAP Connect. It's a big driver if you're in a SAP works, a SAP shop. So they went, okay, we'll have a look at it. And so they went away and started working. Now, this is the solution. And they did some research, and so they had to build up and actually start to understand the solution. Now remember, this is really a thick build. There's about 1,000 extensions and connections. It's quite a complex build for us for the ARC. And we're talking now, how much did it cost?
10.
25 total.